This is a liberal agenda, a liberal program driven by the Obama administration. I want to read you these three quotes, which came in 2008 when the KBRA was made public. After living through moments that would tax the character of most anyone, the good people of the basin came together. Governor Dirk Kemp Thorne, he was Secretary of Interior under the Bush administration. Together we have produced an agreement that will greatly reduce the risk of future shutdowns of the irrigation system. That was a statement made by President George W. Bush. The settlement process is certainly no small undertaking. The groups that have stuck with these negotiations deserve a medal. I've always felt the best and longest lasting solution would come from the various parties in the basin working out a plan that made sense for all concerned. I stand ready to work with my colleagues in Congress to do our part. Meanwhile, I urge those involved in the hydro negotiations to complete their process soon, enabling this historic effort to move forward. That came from Congressman Greg Walden in a press release. This is not about liberals versus Democrats. It's about small communities in the Klamath watershed. And I don't care if you're a commercial fishing community, a tribal community, or an irrigation community. You got a lot of things in common. That's what we all found out. Rural communities, similar values. And to me, this thing's about stability. I think it's about local control.
I've worked for over 20 years in the Western water resources and water policy arena, including 3.5 years as executive director for the Klamath Water Users Association, starting in 2001. That's what brought me to Klamath Falls. For the past 5 years, I've owned a water policy consulting firm here in Klamath Falls, and one of my clients is an organization called the Family Farm Alliance, which I work for as executive director under contract. The Alliance is seen as really a solutions-driven organization by both political parties. We've been asked to testify before congressional committees on water and environmental matters 26 times in the last 5 years. And a lot of those issues that pop up are some of the same issues that folks are wrestling with here in the Klamath Basin.
My name is Greg Addington. I'm the executive director for the Klamath Water Users Association. We represent essentially customers of the Bureau of Reclamation. And I mean customers because these are folks that pay for the services they receive from the Bureau of Reclamation. These are the same people that in 2001 had their water supply curtailed. These folks that I represent, their water supplies from the Klamath system, from either the Klamath Lake or the Klamath River. And they represent about 170,000 acres in the Klamath Reclamation Project, encompass 17 either irrigation districts, drainage districts, improvement districts, ditch companies here in the basin, and about 1,200 family farms and ranches.
My name is Steve Kandra. I'm a third-generation Klamath Irrigation Project farmer. My family has been farming in the Klamath Project since 1911, 99 very tough, challenging years. I have served 27 years of my life as a board of director or a manager of irrigation districts in both Oregon and California, where my farm is located. Even though I live at Merrill, my family has been farming in California for 99 years. So the Klamath Irrigation Project and irrigated agriculture is the story of my family's life and existence in the Klamath Basin.
Thank you. I'm Don Gentry, Vice Chairman of the Klamath Tribes, who are the Klamath, Modoc, and Yehuskan Band of Snake Indians. And I'm here to represent them tonight and answer some of these questions that might be viewed as tough to some. But I'm here to represent the tribes because this is a solution to many years of conflict. It's a solution to 90 years of our fish being denied us is the Klamath Tribes. It's a solution to broken relationships. Having lived here my life long, except for a few years, I have many relationships throughout the community, and it's important for us as a community to come together around these issues and find solutions that benefit all.
My name is Becky Hyde, and I'm a board member of the Upper Klamath Water Users Association. I ranch with my husband and 4 children in Beatty. My husband's family, similar to Steve's story, are going to celebrate our 100th year in ranching in this basin next summer. We are kind of a tough lot. We plan to be ranching 100 years from now up there as well in Beatty. So we're concerned about a lot of things like farming, ranching, tribal issues.
Good evening. I'm Toby Freeman, and I'm Pacific Power's Regional Community Manager. Thanks for having me here this evening. And we are privileged to serve 1.7 million customers in 6 western states. I myself have worked on Klamath-related issues for about 9 years now.
My name is Trey Sen. I'm the director of the Klamath County Economic Development Association, which just a few weeks ago celebrated its 35-year-old anniversary. And our job primarily is recruitment of new industry and/or economic development, and the expansion of new industry or economic development, and of course retention of various economic development interests, which does in our case include, as you would imagine, new and expanded industries, and with Oregon Institute of Technology and high tech and fiber optics and all of that. But it also is a traditional economic development entity.
It's going to be an ongoing discussion about changing the way resources are managed here in this basin, because it hasn't worked for us, and it hasn't worked for a lot of other parties either. Unfortunately, dams are the headline on this thing, and I understand why. That is a big issue. But the KBRA is not about dams. The KBRA is about stability. It's about making sure that you have a viable ag industry here into the future. And others here can talk about it from their perspective. But it's not about dams for us. It's not at all. It is true that the agreements are tied together, the KBRA and the actual Klamath Hydro Settlement Agreement that deals with what happens to the dams. But we wanted them tied together because we didn't want the possibility of dams coming out without us dealing with these other issues. So that's why that's a critical issue for us.
Why the restoration agreement? That's a great question. For my community, which has suffered significant water shutoffs, and that's within the Klamath Irrigation Project twice in less than a decade, the status quo of how we've been doing business is unsustainable, and certainly jeopardizes a large portion of the agricultural economy and base for Klamath County.
When I think of the KBRA and realize where we're at and what it took to get here, the thing that first comes to my mind is people, and not just my people who have been affected by this, the status quo and the problems that we have with a broken ecosystem that affected our fisheries and the battles over water. It's affected all of us as a community. And when I think of the KBRA and I think of the solution that it provides, I think of people. I think of all of us. And it is a real solution. It's so much better than the battles that we've waged against each other over water in the courts and all the money that we spent trying to, I guess, fight for what we think is ours. It's so much better to form partnerships and relationships and realize that we have a lot in common. We're all members of this Klamath Basin. We're all here in this community. We're all here to stay. The Klamath tribes aren't going to go away. You know, we look at our people in the basin as our neighbors, and according to our culture, we've always been a welcoming people. Even there's legends that talk about if we only had a flea to share with our visitors, that we would share a flea.
I will be bold and say that the document is not what's important here. The relationships up and down this river and the change that has happened is what's important. And it's a change not just because of farmer versus fish or, you know, environmentalist versus rancher. It's, we've had battles between the ag community that frankly go against everything that I believe about rural culture.
I think as folks know, and certainly we're hearing here tonight, there are a myriad of environmental, cultural, and public policy issues at play here in the Klamath Basin and that are reflected in these two agreements. The other folks at the table are really the folks who can speak best to those. For us, it's a fairly simple calculus. Our job is to work to deliver the least cost outcome for our customers. PacifiCorp has gone through 9 major FERC relicensings in the past decade and a half. We've settled almost all of those. Settlements like we have over on the North Umpqua River and the Lewis River up in Washington State. We're putting in fish passage facilities. We're modifying operations. They're pretty costly undertakings, but ultimately they represented the best and least cost outcome for our customers. We've got other projects like our Powerdale project on the Columbia River, or on a tributary to the Columbia River, along with our Condit project, where dam removal made most sense. Frankly, it was the least cost alternative available to us. And really, that's what this agreement represents on the Klamath. I know there are a lot of folks who don't understand or may question our motives for entering into the Klamath Hydro Settlement Agreement, but frankly, it's pretty simple. I thought Steve did a great job of sort of talking about what you learn as you deal with these big legal public policy issues. You fight and you find that doesn't work, and then you try and persuade people that your cause is of higher value, and frankly, that doesn't necessarily work either. And eventually, you get to yourself to a place where you discover that the most pragmatic approach is to negotiate. That's what we've done here. We've spent 10 years on this relicensing to date. We know that if the relicensing continues, we're looking at a $400 million capital investment to continue operations, and that operations are going to be severely curtailed because of new operating requirements. The notion that we are going to repeal the Endangered Species Act, the Clean Water Act, National Historic Preservation Act, et cetera, that's not a viable strategy. A viable strategy is to look at that most likely alternative and say, can we get a better deal for our customers? And that's what the Klamath Hydro Settlement Agreement represents. We will continue to operate these projects for the next decade. Yes, we will put a surcharge on our bills and collect a total of $200 million from our customers, about half what they'd spend were we trying to relicense these things. And at the end of those 10 years, we will hand over the keys to a dam removal entity. They will take the risk, cost, and responsibility of removing them if that's what the Secretary of Interior decides in 2012 is the right thing to do here, is in the best public interest. So that's where we sit. And again, our role is very simple. We recognize we sit in a much broader context. The Hydro Settlement Agreement and the Klamath Basin Restoration Agreement are linked, as Greg explained, and they only succeed together. And in that respect, we therefore support the Klamath Basin Restoration Agreement. We've got customers on all sides of this issue. We know what a volatile topic this tends to be. We've been part of this basin for about 100 years now, and we know the tough history this basin has had. The prospect of being able to reach some peace here is certainly something to be commended.
KCETA looks at this as less litigation. I think it looks at it as more certainty for the farmers and for the tribe and for water interests. I think we think that the KBRA equals more jobs in the long run, and perhaps even in the short run when you're doing different mitigation work with the dams and everything. I completely agree. This really isn't about the dams, and I kind of am sorry that somehow it got spun that way once upon a time. The fact is, I think that the dams that will be staying are the ones that are the irrigation dam and the ones that are the flood control dams. So to us, this is somebody, not KCETA. We were not a part of the intricate planning and details of all of this. But when we look at it, when we see what our partners like Pacific Power and the water users and the tribe did, we're pretty solid yes with this. This, we think, makes more sense, however you spell it, than anything that we've seen come down the pipe before or since then.
When you own a hydro project and your 50-year license is expiring and you're going through the relicensing process, you're going to give something up. It's the nature of the beast. The operating conditions you enjoyed for 50 years are gone, and you're looking at more restrictive and costly operating conditions moving forward. So when we get into a relicensing in the first place, we know we're going to give something up. What we've gained with the Klamath Hydro Settlement Agreement, we've gained another 10 years of low-cost operations and benefits to our customers.
How come Keno and Link River Dam are not slated for dam removal in these agreements?
Well, Keno and Link are very important and integral components of the water control system for the Klamath Irrigation Project. And as a matter of fact, probably the key components if we were looking at flood control as water comes out of the upper basin. And so those structures with the agreement would continue to be what I would call an in-place asset with appropriate modifications for operations of the Klamath Irrigation Project and what I call regulations of Upper Klamath Lake to be retained.
So what's the difference then between those two dams and the lower dams?
Basically, it is because of their value to what I call other economic components, and to operate and fix those is a different, what I would call mathematical and economic problem or calculus than the other four dams.
Okay.
Yeah, Dan, I'd just add, I just think it's, I mean, Pacificorp produces hydropower at the other four. There's no hydropower production on Link or Keno, although, maybe there could be at some point. And what Steve said, I mean, they divert water for agriculture. We would have fought tooth and nail over those because that's viability of the Klamath project tied to those two facilities. There is no water diverted for agricultural purposes at the four lower dams.
So why in the KHSA are we choosing to abandon hydroelectric resources when we need hydro energy for Oregon's consumers and newly developed technology could deliver it without impairing fish habitat?
So under the Klamath Hydro Settlement Agreement, it's envisioned that assuming the Secretary determines this is a good idea, that our four dams on the Klamath River will be removed. But that by no means means that Pacific Power is abandoning hydro. We own 21 facilities around the West. We've got 9 FERC licenses, and almost 10% of our generating portfolio is actually hydropower. Hydrokinetic is what we would probably categorize as an emerging technology, much like wave energy, solar, etc. And we tend to not spend customer dollars on R&D and on emerging technology. We provide some support to the University of Oregon, for example, to OSU, who's doing some research into wave energy. But we make investments on behalf of our customers in really proven, reliable technology that we know is reasonable cost and that we understand what we're getting into. Well, so we've got an obligation to serve, and I know that one of the things that, for example, Commissioner Huckel spoke about in a recent op-ed piece was perhaps the misperception that if our dams aren't on the Klamath River, that everybody's lights are going to go out in Klamath Falls and we're all going to be living in the dark. And our business doesn't work that way. We are given the rights to serve customers within a certain geographic area, but with those rights come responsibilities, and that means obligation to serve. So right now, we have resources all over the West, feed into a grid, and they're helping keep your home bright and warm, and that's going to continue to be the case even if these facilities aren't on the Klamath River anymore. What we negotiated in this agreement earlier is a cost cap. Our customers' contribution towards the cost of dam removal will be no more than $200 million. If the Secretary decides that dam removal is not in the public interest, the dollars that we're collecting right now through the surcharge our Oregon customers have been seeing on their bill since March, those dollars go right into covering relicensing costs.
And if the decision comes out the other way, that the dams are going to remain in place, how much will it cost Pacific Court to keep the dams in place and find other measures to comply with modern environmental laws?
There's more regulatory process to come, so certainly folks could come up with additional operating constraints on the project, additional requirements that we have to comply with if we want to continue operating. Based upon what we know 10 years into this relicensing, we're looking at about $400 million of new capital investment and constraints on future operations under any new license.
I just want to, and Toby said it, and you actually said it, but I just want to underscore it, Joe, because despite what the public may see or read or hear, there is no dam removal agreement. There is no agreement. There is an agreement to enter into a process to determine whether or not that's going to happen, and and Toby has referred to the Secretary of Interior making a determination, but I mean that's going to involve economic studies, it's going to involve environmental studies, biology, what happens, how much sediment is there, what's in it, what's the effect. There is a myriad of things that have to be checked off the list. And I bring that up because it was important to our guys, to just blanketly say, I mean, we generally like dams, we depend on dams, we talked about Link and Keno. It was important that there's going to be some thorough process to analyze the costs and the benefits of this thing. So I just want to make that point. There is no dam removal agreement.
Thank you.
Before I came here tonight, I was able to go have a cup of tea with a good friend of mine in town who lives in a house that's probably 80, 85 years old. And I said, hey, do you happen to have a copy of your power bill? And she said, it came today. So I said, could I just get a copy of that and see how much this is costing you, a person who lives in town, on your bill? So here's the bill, and for the removal of J.C. Boyle, it's 18 cents a month, and for the removal of Copco and Iron Gate, it's 55 cents a month. So I think it's just important that we are able to say to the people in the city, we care about your power bills and we care about you too, and we didn't run around creating something that was going to hurt people in Klamath Falls. That was never an intent. And so when you have people, and I have had, I had an older woman approach me about a month ago with that very thing, saying, if these dams come out, the power is going to go out in Klamath Falls. And it's like, I do not want anybody to be frightened about this in that kind of way. And then also just to say, I can't buy a bottle of water for 73 cents. And that's for a month. So what we know is that it'll be more expensive to retrofit those than to take care of this. And I'm amazed that there are opponents to this who are actively, trying to create some sort of feeling of warmth around something that is no longer serviceable. It's like not even a good basic choice to be making in terms of economics and taking care of ratepayers or taxpayers. It just doesn't make any sense. So I think we need to be fiscally careful here for this community's future.
Becky, I'm really glad you brought the bill tonight, because I think most of our customers look at the bottom line and write the check and never bother reading it and seeing what those various itemized items are. I think your friend probably is good at energy conservation, and that's awesome, because that 73 cents, we've estimated that the average customer is probably going to see about $1.50 on their bill through this surcharge. But, you know, that's great. 73 cents, good for her.
And that's because the rates were capped for dam removal.
Yeah, and these dollars are collected over 10 years. I mean, one of the things we're going to talk about tonight is rate shock, but frankly, that was an important consideration for us as well as we looked at this. You know, we wanted to make sure that as we collected this surcharge, it happened over time, so that folks weren't getting hit in 1 month, 1 year, something like that. 73 cents a month is probably something that almost anybody would not find painful.
Have the dams that are under consideration now, have those dams ever been used to store water for irrigation?
No.
Or flood control? No. Toby, it sounds like you're the...
No, and you know, flood control, again, I think it's something that folks assume about dams, and that's not what these facilities are about. These facilities were designed to basically manage water on a daily basis. They do not provide seasonal storage. If you look at the whole Klamath Basin, and Greg, correct me if I get the numbers wrong, but my recollection is Upper Klamath Lake provides 242 days of active storage in this system. Our dams, our reservoirs combined provide a collective 5 days of active storage. I did mention earlier that PacifiCorp has settled a series of FERC relicensings, and all of those like this, in meetings and negotiations where we're sharing sensitive business information, we always insist on confidentiality. It's just standard business practice. We do it, I'm sure most any prudent business would.
What does it mean, the ruling for the Oregon PUC on the surcharge?
We were pleased to see that ruling. Basically, what the Oregon PUC said is that we did right by our customers in developing this insurance policy, this Klamath Hydro Settlement Agreement, that caps our ratepayers' contribution to the potential cost of dam removal. That's really what that's about, that this was prudent business on our part, and we were acting in the best interests of our customers.
Why is it important that this water balance work? And it's something I've wanted to say since we got here tonight, so I'm going to just say it. When Steve and I and a representative from the Klamath tribes were down in Tule Lake at the fair talking about the KBRA with our community, there was a small boy who came up to the booth, and I have little boys, so I would guess he's between my little boy's age, somewhere between 8 and 10. And this little guy looked at me and said, "Will this agreement help migrant workers?" And this kid might as well have been a 35-year-old man worried about his mortgage. And I said, well, you know, when farmers get water, people have work. And he said, well, right now, and that's because everybody needs to understand, this year is no cakewalk. There's a lot of people that can get water this year. We live from year to year in crisis. So then he said, my mom only has 10 hours of work a week in the potato sheds. And I said, okay. And I said, well, how about your dad? He said, I don't have a dad. It is time for the adults of this community to figure this out. Okay. It is a responsibility to our children.
If we are not successful, and we go back to the bad old days of every year there being litigation and every year there being uncertainty of water, it affects not just agriculture, but all kinds of other similar and equal to and different than economic development projects. And you can bet your bottom dollar that will happen again.
Joe, I just wanted to answer your question. I mean, the answer is that yes, taxpayers do deserve some protection here, and I think Steve and others have kind of talked about, treating symptoms. But, through our representatives in Congress, there's prioritizations. I mean, the priority of Congress and the people of the United States has been an Endangered Species Act, a Clean Water Act, a variety of other things that come with a cost. I think Toby was right on. Just to go out and say, well, we need to get rid of those things. That's not realistic. I mean, I don't care who's in control of the White House or Congress. We've seen conservatives in control of both bodies, and no progress made on those fronts. So Congress makes priorities.
In the final analysis, I still don't think, KCTA still doesn't think, I think for the most part Team Klamath doesn't think there is a better it out there. This is the preferred policy for us.
And I would just, again, state that the KBRA offers solutions to the real problems. The status quo isn't going to get us there. In fact, if status quo made it even create more problems, I can envision perhaps further listings of other species. We need to invest in our future. Though it sounds like an expensive price tag, restoration of our ecosystem is an essential component. It's going to provide more fish. It would take away that threat of the Endangered Species Act. It's going to provide more reliable water for agriculture. It's going to provide more fish for affected tribes and the fishing communities. It's a solution, and it's a comprehensive solution, and so much better than what has been going on.
These are three quotes. One of the things that has been frustrating to me and a lot of the people I represent is the characterization that this is a liberal agenda, a liberal program driven by the Obama administration. And so I want to read you these three quotes, which came in 2008 when the KBRA was made public. After living through moments that would tax the character of most anyone, the good people of the basin came together. That's Governor Dirk Kemp Thorne. He was Secretary of Interior under the Bush administration. Together, we have produced an agreement that will greatly reduce the risk of future shutdowns of the irrigation system. That was a statement made by President George W. Bush. And then finally, the settlement process is certainly no small undertaking. The groups that have stuck with these negotiations deserve a medal. I've always felt the best and longest lasting solution would come from the various parties in the basin working out a plan that made sense for all concerned. I stand ready to work with my colleagues in Congress to do our part. Meanwhile, I urge those involved in the hydro negotiations to complete their process soon, enabling this historic effort to move forward. That came from Congressman Greg Walden in a press release. This is not about liberals versus Democrats. It's about small communities in the Klamath watershed. And I don't care if you're a commercial fishing community, a tribal community, or an irrigation community. You got a lot of things in common. That's what we all found out. Rural communities, similar values. And to me, this thing's about stability. I think it's about local control.